Hello, so in this video, we're going to learn how to fire a missile or shoot things by instantiating bullets into the world from our player. And it's going to be what direction we're facing. So if we're facing left and we press the space bar, we're going to fire straight out left. If we're facing up and we press space bar, we're going to fire up, and we can go rapid fire. We can go as fast as we want, as many bullets as we want. Any size of bullet you want, any speed of bullet you want, and they can last as long as you want. So we're just going to fix something from the last project. If you haven't done so already and you like to follow along, you can download the source code from the previous project. It doesn't matter if you're on a Mac or not. You should still be able to compile things properly if you transfer stuff over intelligently. So I haven't planned out how I'm going to do this. So if you're trying to copy the code, you may be deleting things at random times. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to run it. And I noticed something from the last project in that it starts out that our sprite is a giant sprite sheet, and then we start having a proper animation counter. So that's very easy to fix. We're just going to go into our player, and we're going to have it so that the sprite in our initiation starts out at 0, 0, and then it loads in the regular dimensions. Now it shouldn't be showing the entire sprite sheet now. Yeah, okay, there we go. That's what we want. So what we're going to do is create a new file and a C++ file. You want header checked, and we're going to name this, how about projectile? And so when you create a new class, it's easy to just sort of copy from your other ones. This one's also going to be instantiating, inheriting from the entity class that we made. It's sort of the base class that we use. But we are going to just sort of copy what we did in player to make it easier on ourselves. So I will paste that in there. So we are going to hashtag include entity.h, and we name this, looks like I'm getting some lag. We're going to name this projectile, and we will just have those two. Movement speed, it needs a movement speed. We can make it 10 to start out. And attack damage, which won't really matter right now. Projectile. And I don't think we really need those methods right now, but perhaps we will in the future. We're just going to take this, paste it into here, change it to projectile, and so the rect size, we're not going to use a sprite for now, so we'll just comment that out. We can make the projectile green, and the position can just be at 0 because it's going to be completely on what the player's position is. We can make it 10 by 10 for now, the size. And so there we go. So let's think about this. So we have our little player running around. Run around there. And when we press spacebar, we want him to shoot something. So what we're going to need to do is actually create a iterator and a vector array to hold all of these projectiles that we instantiate into the world. To instantiate means to just sort of create a copy from the class, I suppose, into the world. And I'll just use a previous project as a reference. So we'll use this one, and we'll just take a look at the code for setting up the vector array. So just how about after we declare our class object, we will create our projectile vector array. And don't worry if this looks confusing. It's kind of like a little bit of copying and pasting sort of thing. So we have a vector, and it's going to be of type projectile. And we have an iterator, and oh yes, sorry, we need to include the projectile header in this main. And so we have a vector, and it's type projectile, and we have an iterator called iter, and the iterator is just sort of a thing that references where we are in the array. So it's not very confusing. And then we have a vector array of type projectile. So it's an array. It's a container that holds things, but it holds only projectile objects. And we're going to call it projectile array. And then we are going to actually create an object that we're going to push into the array. So we're going to call this projectile object. And it's a class projectile, and we'll name it projectile1. Okay. And so how about we create a method that, no, I don't think we need a method for that right now. So, okay, we have our vector array projectile. We have a projectile object. How about we set up the spacebar? So let's just go to sfml-dev.org, learn tutorials, and we're going to go to keyboard input. We'll copy that code, and then we'll just paste that in here. And we're going to change it from left being pressed to space. And we will make it so that the we want to fire a projectile. So we want to take the projectile 1 dot rect dot set the position, and we want to set the position of this at where our player is. So we go player1 dot rect dot get position. So we're not splitting this into x and y because it's actually being saved as a like 2f vector. It has both an x and a y position. So we have our projectile1.rect.set position. We're setting the position of the projectile object that isn't instantiated yet, and we are setting it to the position of our player. So then what we want to do is we want to push back this projectile into the array that we created up here. So we go projectile array dot pushback, and then we insert the projectile1 object. So what we just did is we just set the position to the player, and now we're pushing it back and we're creating it in the world. But in order to see these projectiles, what we need to do is create a loop that draws them to the screen. So we first will say fire So I'm going to go to the other project that I had just so it's easier. So I'll explain this in just a second. So we need to actually declare some counters as variables. So we'll create counter and counter 2 and counter 3. And projectile array. Okay, so this is going to be cycling through each of our objects that are in our projectile array. It starts with counter equals 0, but it's actually not necessary for this loop. We just use it for ourselves, which you'll soon see. How this for loop works is we start at the very beginning. Iter, which we set above, is actually set to the beginning of the projectile array. So let's say you have a bunch of stuff a bunch of projectiles in the array. The iter is going to be set to the first one, and then as long as the iter does not equal the end, and the end is actually one past the last one, then it's going to keep looping through and increasing the iter by 1. So it's going to start here, reaches the end, and then it breaks the loop. So that's how that works. But what we want to do is we want to go window.draw and then projectile array, and then we use these square brackets, and we're actually going to use that counter that we set up. And then we're going to go dot rect. So just pause the video if this doesn't make sense and take a closer look at it. We're drawing each of these rects for each of the projectiles in the array, and we are spawning these projectiles by pressing the space bar at where our player is. So now we should be able to see the projectiles actually on the screen, but our projectiles aren't going to be moving. And if they were moving, they wouldn't be moving in the right direction according to the player, which we'll soon fix. But if we run this, we should be able to spawn like a paintbrush a bunch of objects where the player is. There you go. You just created a sprite paint program. Let's try and draw Mario. Nice. That's my terrible Mario. Okay, so we actually want to make these projectiles move. So how are we going to do that? How about we make a variable inside our projectile? So we can say, how about int direction equals 0? And we'll just make a comment. So how about if the direction is, if the number is 1, then it can be going up. If it's 2, it can be going down. 3 can be going left. 4 can be going right. I didn't plan what we're going to do, so I'm sort of making this up. Okay, direction. All right. So I think we should also do the same thing inside our player header. So we'll just copy that. So we paste that in. And we're going to make it so that we set it whenever the keyboard's pressed in that direction. So direction equals 1 here. Direction equals 2. My video's in the way. Direction equals 3. Direction equals 4. So now whenever our player is facing a certain point, we should be able to tell which direction they're facing. So we can do that here, I believe. So we can detect that. So if player, no, we'll do it above. We'll do it when we instantiate. So, because we don't want the objects, we don't want to fire missiles in a bunch of different places and then they all turn mid-direction. We don't want that. So we're going to do it before we push it back. So we're going to go projectile 1 dot direction equals player 1 dot direction. So now when we fire it, it's going to basically like save the player's direction from when it was fired from. So now we can actually go into our projectile, and how about we go, we'll call it update. Let's copy this code. We have to rename this projectile. And so we're going to say if direction equals 1, then we want to move the projectile. So we go no, we don't go projectile. We go rec.move, and then we want to move it up. So we have negative in the y direction. If it's this one, we go down, just positive in y. This one is left, I believe, so that is negative in x. And this one is positive in x. So this is right, this is left, this is down, and this is up. So we actually need to call this method in order for our projectile to be moving. So we can just do that in the cycle that's going through here before we draw. So we can write projectile array. We do the same sort of counter to access the specific point. So the first loop through, it's going to be counter 0. It's going to be the 0th position we're manipulating. It's going to cycle through all of them in the array. So projectile array counter dot update, and that's it. So now we should actually be firing a projectile when we press space in the appropriate direction. Pray to God that that's actually what happens. Okay, so here we're moving. Oh my God! Fire the missiles! Fire the missiles! It actually works. So we can see that our projectile is sort of spawning a bit above, sort of thing. It's always like to the side a bit. Let's see if we could fix that. So we're setting the position right here, and it's just a straight up setting it at the corner. But what if we broke it down into x and y? Then we could go .x and .y, and then we could change where both of them are. So what we could do is we could add player1.rect.get size dot x divided by 2. So we're taking the position, and then we're taking how big is the player in the x. And so it's going to add it, so it's going to jump over that much. But then we're at the other side, so we have to divide it by 2. So now we're in the middle, and we should be firing from the middle of the player. So we're going to do the same thing for y. So player1.rect.getSize.y divided by 2. So now it actually should be firing from the center, hopefully. And it seems like the we're loading in the sprite like this, but the sprite seems to not be the same, not be totally like fit in perfectly. So that's not really our fault. It is spawning it. Actually, wait a second. It's spawning it from the center, but the projectile has a width. So we need to compensate for the projectile's width, I believe. So if we go minus projectile1 dot rect dot get size dot x divided by 2. If we go minus projectile1 dot rect dot get size dot y divided by 2. Now I'm pretty sure it should be spawning in from the middle. Hopefully I'm not confusing everyone. It does! Hooray! It's kind of bad that our players kind of can go ahead of the projectiles. We could make them faster. So movement speed, we should have set this as movement speed. So we can just change that. So now they should be traveling at what we set it initially as 10. So that should be like super fast. Boom. It's like a freaking laser now. Anyways, so we have our little sprite. He's wandering around. He's shooting shit. Oh, that's pretty cool. And we need something for him to shoot. We need something for him to destroy. And then we need to have it so that we have collisions and we can destroy something like an enemy, for instance. So in the next video, we're going to be creating our enemy class. We're going to give it artificial intelligence, either in the next video or the one after that, so it can wander around. And then we are going to fire missiles at it and destroy it. And it'll have a certain amount of HP and stuff like that. So stay tuned and thumbs up if you enjoyed the video.